Welcome to You, Me, Empathy. Thank you for listening. We would like to remind you that this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Known as just a silly boy with a feely heart. Please consider supporting the show. Check us out on Patreon or simply leave a review on iTunes. Here's your host and creator of the show, Known Wells.
Hello, Feely humans. Welcome to another episode of You, Me, Empathy. My name is Known Wells, and this is episode 122 on eating disorder signs, myths, and recovery with Jennifer Rollin. Jennifer is an eating disorder therapist. She's also the founder of the amazing The Eating Disorder Center. And Jennifer and I, in this episode, talk a lot about eating disorders, as I just mentioned. Lots of great information here. Both Jennifer and I are recovered from eating disorders ourselves, and Jennifer courageously opens up about her own mental health journey and recovery from anorexia, orthorexia, etc. And we get into eating disorders as coping mechanisms and feeling out of control and diet culture and just the amazing work that the Eating Disorder Center is doing. You can follow Jennifer on Instagram. She's at Jennifer Rollin, JENNIFER_Rollin, ROLLIN. Okay, before we get to the episode, though, I just wanted to remind you a number of things. Every Sunday at 2 p.m. Pacific time, that's 5 p.m. Eastern time, I am hosting a 90-minute virtual Feely Human party just for you guys to feel maybe a little less alone right now, feel maybe a little bit more connected during this time of coronavirus and quarantine and stay at home, all of that stuff. So you can show up, you cannot. It's every Sunday, 2 p.m. If you want the actual invite for your calendar, you can just DM me on Instagram at YouMeEmpathy or at FeelyHuman, and I'll share it with you, or you can just show up. The link is bit.ly/FeelyHuman. bit.ly/FeelyHuman. That's bit.ly/FeelyHuman. So check it out. Every Sunday at 2 p.m. Come share how your week has been and all that stuff. It's just about connecting. The other thing is, please, if you haven't yet, please leave a review for You, Me, Empathy in Apple Podcasts. It's a free way to support the podcast that I do every single week, and I'd love to see those reviews. And as long as it's an authentic review, I love it. Even if it's critical, that's okay too. Just go and leave a authentic, honest review for You, Me, Empathy in Apple Podcasts. Thank you. And then Feely Human stuff. It's coming. It's coming very soon, you guys. Right now it's probably going to be May when the website launches. But I'm in talks with some people about doing workshops and getting the conversation going around art collaboration. If you're an artist, a freelance artist, designer, get in touch with me. Part of the sort of ethos of the Feely Human Collective is collaboration, and so I want to support you and see about getting your designs and stuff into the Feely Human shop. To support you and to celebrate your Feely ways in your art, as well as the workshops. If you're someone who feels called to educate and inspire and empower, part of the Feely Human Collective will be workshops. So get in touch if you feel like leading a workshop. Get in touch with me. Again, you can connect with me on Instagram at YouMeEmpathy or at FeelyHuman. Make sure you're following both of those. And if you want to sign up for the newsletter, the Feely Human Collective newsletter in advance, go to feelyhuman.co right now, and you can sign up there, and you'll be the first to know when the website launches. Okay, I think that's it. I hope you guys are doing okay in this time of quarantine. Remember, you're not alone. I love you very much. We have each other, right? Right. Okay. Enjoy this episode with my special guest, Jennifer Rollin, on eating disorder signs, myths, and recovery. Welcome to You, Me, Empathy, a podcast about exploring the struggles we face in our day-to-day lives as humans trying to get by on this wondrous and overwhelming pale blue dot. The intent of You, Me, Empathy is to talk openly, without judgment, about our mental health, our neuroses, our shared anxieties and worries, to create a dialogue that is vulnerable and deeply human and empathetic, and to share that dialogue with others to inspire emotional and cognitive collaboration and insight, so we can, hand in hand, break down the stigma that make us feel shame and guilt for struggling, for feeling our feelings, for being feely humans. You, Me, Empathy is a safe, friendly space designed to inspire the beauty in each of us. Today, I am so grateful to be connecting with Camp Healed Buddy, eating disorder therapist, founder of the Eating Disorder Center, and foe to diet culture everywhere, Jennifer Rollin. Hello, Jennifer.
Hey, I'm so happy to be here.
Happy to have you. So the listeners should know that I met Jennifer at Camp Heal, this wonderful camp put on by an amazing organization, Project Heal. And it was. I'm assuming you had a wonderful time as I did.
Yeah, I had such a great time there, and I remember very vividly meeting you with myself and my good friend Dr. Colleen Reichman, walking up the side of a mountain being like, are we at the right place? Are we not? And you were so helpful. So I really appreciate it.
I remember that vividly because I was all alone and probably, it might have seemed weird that this long-haired hippie looking dude is just hanging out by himself, but I was happy to help.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, before we get into it, Jennifer, we always kick off the show with an emotional check-in. How are you feeling? How's your week been?
My week's been really good. I'm feeling pretty good. It's the weekend, so I've just been relaxing with my boyfriend. We've been catching up on Netflix, eating lots of good food, getting outdoors a little bit. So I'm feeling very calm and rested and just overall happy, I would say.
Lovely. What have you been enjoying on Netflix?
Okay, so we've been watching The Good Place, which I love the main actress, Jamila Jamil, because she calls out diet culture on her Instagram all the time. And then I'm also going to confess, it's a confession because I don't support the premise of this show in any way, shape, or form.
Okay.
But I do also watch The Bachelor.
Okay, got it.
I have any issues with, but sometimes you need that comedic relief at the end of a long day.
Yeah, I think that it can serve a purpose for sure. And I'm all on board on The Good Place. My wife and I are huge fans, and Jamila Jamil is definitely on my sort of dream guest list for this podcast.
Yeah, that would be amazing. She seems awesome.
Yes, absolutely. Awesome. I've been building this. I'm launching a new sort of collaborative mental health sort of space called the Feely Human Collective, and the first sort of phase of it, I'm crowdfunding, which starts next week, and I've been working hard on it, and I'm feeling all the feelings right now. I'm nervous. I'm excited. I'm not trying to. I wonder if you can relate to this, Jennifer. I'm trying to just kind of temper my expectations going into it because I feel like it's such a passionate project, right? I can get way up in my head about it. So I want to go into it with low tempered, calm expectations.
Yeah. No, I can definitely relate to that for sure, especially when launching something.
Totally. Yeah. Because you want it to, do all the things you think it's going to do. And, I've had good feedback leading up to it, but you never know.
Yeah. No, again, I can definitely relate to that, like trying to keep expectations low while being really excited about something at the same time.
Yeah. What is there something recent in recent memory that can relate to that?
Well, I think there's not a ton that comes up recently, but I think that's kind of been my MO throughout just my career, is that I never expected to achieve a lot of the things that I achieved. And when like launching something new, like for instance, my group practice, the Eating Disorder Center, I didn't have big expectations when I went into it. I started with just myself and two other people was how we first started. And I didn't have like, again, super high expectations of what would happen, although I did obviously have some goals, but I was trying to keep my expectations low while still being excited and putting my all into it. And now we're up to 9 other people and serving a ton of clients and helping a lot of people. But I think it's that dialectic, right, between keeping expectations low while still holding the big vision that you have for yourself.
Yeah.
It's like that path, connecting like self-acceptance and however this turns out is the way it's meant to be. And I'm going to put my all and my energy into it because I'm so passionate about what I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. I love that. That's really smart. And congrats on growing that. That's amazing.
Thanks. Yeah, it's so exciting. And I just am beyond happy for the amazing team that I have. I think it's given back to me in a lot of ways because I get a lot of satisfaction from helping other clinicians to build themselves up and educating other clinicians and then being able to serve even more clients around the world. Yeah. So it's an awesome feeling.
That's so cool. Yeah. So, I do want to get into the Eating Disorder Center and what you've started there, but I'd like to start sort of a bit further back in time. And can you give me, Jennifer, like the question I always ask my guests is, can you give me a couple of sort of seminal moments from your mental health journey? And by that, I mean, distinct memories in your mind that were integral in your own mental health. They could be from childhood. They could be, from teenager years, just something that sticks out as being sort of a couple of pivotal moments in that speak to really who you are as a person today.
Yeah. I mean, when you say that, that's a great question. There are definitely a lot, but I can pick just a few. I think probably one of my first forays, so to speak, into recognizing that something was going on with my mental health. Although, I definitely at times struggled with low moods when I was younger. It was nothing super significant. So one big memory that I do have was growing up, I had a pretty normal relationship with food in my body. It wasn't really something I thought about a lot. And I remember when I was in my senior year of high school, I started comparing myself a lot to the way that my friends looked. And I just happened to be in a friend group where everybody was naturally smaller than I was. And I started to feel badly about that, coupled with being really anxious about going to college and also struggling with some anxiety as well. And so I ended up taking some of my friends' Adderall prescription and using Adderall for about a month with really the driving force behind it was to try to eat less and to lose weight. And that did end up happening. And, someone told the school guidance counselor, my parents eventually found out. But like when you said pivotal moment, one for me was my guidance counselor had called my parents. I wasn't discreet about the fact that I was abusing prescription medication, so people knew about it. And I remember I was in theater class because I was really into theater in high school and part of college. And my dad, like the door opened of the classroom, my dad yelled, and he doesn't yell a lot, and was like, "Get out here." And I went outside and I ran into the fitting room actually first, threw the pills, which were in a little pouch, into the dressing room, and then ran outside. And my parents dumped my book bag on the grass, and they were like, "We heard you're doing prescription pills." And after that, I didn't, I stopped using the Adderall, and I went back to eating normally. And I think that was like a foreshadowing into what would eventually be an eating disorder. But that was a really pivotal moment for me. And again, it was a very dramatic moment, but we resolved it. I came clean to my parents, and I stopped using the medication, went back to eating normally. So it really kind of felt like a blip on the radar for me, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then there were definitely other moments. I think freshman year of college, I had a really hard time following a breakup and was really struggling with alcoholism and suicidal ideation. And without going too much into that, I'll just say there were some moments there in terms of really grappling with depression that stood out to me. And then I think another, like the third one that stands out to me, is the first time I admitted to someone that I thought I might have a problem with an eating disorder. And this was in college. And it was when, it kind of started out as me saying I'm going to lose weight in the quote unquote healthy way, which is not a thing, but I thought it was at the time. And at first it looked very much like orthorexia, exercising more, obsessed with clean eating. And then it transitioned into more of an anorexia presentation. And however, while I had lost a significant amount of weight, I wasn't to the point where someone would look at me and know that I was unwell. And people praised me for how I looked actually. And so it was a big deal to me to even come to the awareness and recognition. And I reached out to someone who had gone to my college, who had been very public about having recovered from an eating disorder. And I was like, can we get coffee? I think I might have a problem. And that is what put me on the path to recovery. So I remember that moment really vividly, and how anxious I was to meet up with her and not sure if she would take me seriously or think that I was sick enough. So those were all some really, I guess, critical. Sorry, that was a lot at one time. But moments for me in terms of mental health.
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that. Let's sort of unpack the last one. First of all, like the courage to sort of admit that you may have an issue is huge. I'm wondering, like, you're getting, like, that's the insidious thing about these things, right? Like, and I don't know if you know, Jennifer, but I have eating disorder history myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so the insidious thing about it is that it is culturally, we, as you know very well, being the foe to diet culture, culturally, we get all this sort of admiration, right, for quote unquote losing weight or looking thin, these things. And so how did you like muster the courage to say it? Like, and what are you seeing in your sort of day to day that you're just like, okay, this is not right. This doesn't feel good to me, because you were, as you said, you were getting maybe attention, you were getting, you were fitting in, so to speak, right? Like what sort of specifically made you say, okay, I have a problem?
Yeah, so there were some things for sure that alerted me that something was wrong, especially barring that 1 month in high school, no eating disorder history, and having, again, a pretty normal relationship to food most of my life. One sign was I was restricting pretty heavily, but I felt that I was eating a lot because I was eating a lot of foods that were high in volume. And so I didn't recognize the extent of my restriction, I guess, at the time, or I thought, well, everyone's doing it. Everyone's dieting. This is normal. This is fine. I'm just trying to lose weight. But I started noticing things like I started getting incredibly cold, like bone-chillingly cold. And I remember that. It was very uncomfortable. And I'm somebody naturally now and growing up who always runs hot. All of my clients know this because the office is always kind of cool. And so for me to go from somebody who always runs hot to bone-chillingly cold all of the time, I started breaking out on my face because I wasn't getting enough nutrients, specifically, I think, fat content and carbohydrates. And And then in the mental piece, I think, was really what alerted me the most. I found myself constantly thinking about food when I was walking, thinking about my steps, cooking elaborate meals for other people that I wouldn't eat. And just like the obsessive quality of it was something I'd never experienced before. And I was like, this is not normal. Like something is wrong with me. And I remember confiding in, I think it was maybe one or two friends. And the thing is, they truly didn't know any better. I think they just knew I had an anxious temperament, and they were like, no, you're fine. Like, you look great. I wouldn't worry about it. Like, you don't look like you've lost too much weight. You're fine. And I was like, no, but something is really wrong here. Like, I was afraid to go out to eat. I was, anxious a week in advance if I would have to go out to eat. And I had a boyfriend at the time. And I remember another moment for me was he invited me to stay with his family for the weekend out of town. And they didn't have a gym there because I was staying at his house, and his mom would be preparing the food. And so I sat in my therapist's office, who was not in any way an eating disorder specialist. I'd been seeing him following a breakup, and he was like, are you anxious about something else? Like, is there something underneath this? And I was like, no, I'm terrified of the food and not being able to go to the gym. And so that's when I recognized, like, something is really wrong. I feel like I really have a problem. And I was just very depressed at that time and really miserable. And that's what I was like, I don't want to live like this anymore. It feels awful, but I also don't feel like I can get out of it. So I really need to reach out to someone and try to get help.
Yeah. Wow. How long did that go on before you started reaching out?
Yeah, it didn't go on super long, which I feel really fortunate about, because I know a lot of people struggle for years in silence without getting help. But I would say it was maybe about 6 months, perhaps. So it was pretty early into me struggling that, again, at max 6 to 8 months. I don't remember an exact timeline. Wow. Where I reached out to the person who had gone to my college, and then she gave me recommendations, and I searched online and found eating disorder treatment providers.
Gotcha. And so when I was going through my anorexia, I guess it was around the same time. I was, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, around there, through those years, mostly. And this was, I'm 38. So this was many years ago, right? This was 20 years ago. And at the time, like, I know that I had there was no context for eating disorders. Like, what did you use, and what did you know about eating disorders? Did you know anything? Like, did you do research? Did you know anyone else who sort of struggled with an eating disorder, or is this all sort of you figuring out on your own?
Yeah, so I knew almost nothing about eating disorders. The only barometer that I had was that one person who went to my college, who I was Facebook friends with, who had talked about recovery, but I had no context for it. And honestly, looking back, I was very uninformed. I bought into a lot of the stereotypes, and I really had no context for it. It was not something that was talked about. It's not something I learned about in school. Maybe they had like a 2-second section on it in my health class, but I certainly wasn't paying attention in that class in high school. So yeah, I had very little context for it. And I think that's part of what enabled this to, not that the knowledge would have stopped me necessarily, but I really was blindly unaware until the point where, at that point, even though it was quick, I had spiraled from, quote unquote, normative dieting, which is still quite disordered, into a full blown eating disorder. And it took me getting to that rock bottom place where my every waking thought was about food in my body to be like, this is a problem. Because when I initially started restricting, I was like, everybody else is doing this. This is fine. This is dieting. This is what the whole world does. This is what I've learned about from other people. And I never in 1,000 years thought I would struggle with an eating disorder ever. That was not something that had ever crossed my mind. And it took me being in the throes of it to finally realize, okay, I need to educate myself on this and figure out what's going on and understand it, because I had no knowledge base before.
Yeah. So looking back now on that time, would you say you had anorexia and orthorexia, both those things?
Yeah, so I definitely struggled with like a variety of eating disorder behaviors throughout my eating disorder journey. But in the beginning, it was 100% orthorexia that I was then diagnosed with anorexia. I would say probably anorexia with orthorexic features.
Gotcha. And did you, so you reach out, you admit that you had help. What was the next step after that?
So the next step, it's funny looking back because I remember thinking, again, I was wise to the world of therapy because when I'd gone through the breakup, I asked one of my friends who I remembered had seen a therapist, like, do you know anyone I should see? And so I'd been in therapy, most of college, but again, it wasn't eating disorder therapy, like the beginning of college. So I knew what that was, but I remember thinking to myself, because of my lack of knowledge, I was like, well, this is a food problem, so I just need to see a dietitian and then they'll fix me. They'll tell me what to eat and I'll be fine. That was my train of thinking. So the first person I reached out to was an eating disorder dietitian. And then after meeting with her, I kind of realized, oh, like people actually get what this is and can talk about it, because my other therapist was like, I went to a CEU once and I think you might have this problem, but like he didn't know how to treat it at all. So after seeing the dietitian for a little while, I realized pretty quickly that I needed to be meeting with an eating disorder therapist as well. And so that's when I found an eating disorder therapist.
I'm struck by what you said about like thinking that like, oh, this is a food issue or a diet issue, right? Like I won't sort of give names, but there's someone close to me right now who has been struggling and you know, I feel strongly, you know, knowing my history, and I'm wondering if you sort of see this in your own clients, is I feel strongly that there is a component of masking, right? Like she's saying I'm having stomach aches or whatever, and those all very could be valid and true 100%, but I feel like there's a lot of masking. And by that, I mean like, I have SIBO or something and I can only eat these foods or whatever. And that may be true, but I feel like there's like this strong, and again, I'm just a silly boy. I'm not a professional like you, but like, I feel like there's this strong sort of, mental piece that's like sort of convincing us that like, these things are true when in fact, like maybe they're not, or maybe it's a bit more nuanced than that. And maybe that's just the eating disorder speaking. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And the way I see it is, for me, it's about the food and it's also not about the food. So certainly, you know, I work closely with dietitians and I work with clients on setting food goals and eating challenge foods together in sessions. So we have to be addressing like the behavioral component or we're not going to get anywhere. Like if we just sit in session and it's like, tell me about your childhood, like, and that's all I do, I'm not going to get very far, right, with a client with an eating disorder. And I think we also have to look at all that's underneath and maintaining the eating disorder, because I really view eating disorders as a coping strategy. And so if we're not, in tandem addressing some of the underlying issues, then this can just crop up in other ways. So I think both parts are really important. And I think for myself, my eating disorder, again, it was about the food. I had to do a lot of behavioral stuff to challenge the food and gain weight and whatnot. But I think it was also a smokescreen for anxiety, for fear of being independent, for not feeling out of control and uncertain about what I wanted to do for my career, dealing with trauma, feelings of low self-worth, never feeling good enough. So I think there was a lot that had to be unpacked underneath it. So just eating the food wasn't enough. But the irony of that is with a malnourished brain, it's hard to do any real therapeutic work, right? So we definitely have to get the person nourished first.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you said that, because my next question, as you were talking, was going to be like, what did you learn about yourself during your own recovery? Because I know for myself, like, yeah, like you, I still struggle with like the feeling of like, I don't deserve love and all these sort of self-hating, self-limiting beliefs that that really fueled my own eating disorder. Any sort of specific like call outs for like things you've learned along the way in your own recovery?
Yeah, I mean, I think I learned so much. I learned kind of what you're talking about in the sense of that we all have limiting beliefs, and many of them stem from core wounds from childhood or as we were growing up. And then we develop these ways to make sense of the world. And I think that now I'm able to see in my life that, again, in any area of our lives, there are many commonly held, even like societal limiting beliefs about what we can achieve and what we can do and following your passion and whatnot. So I think being able to push through and challenge what was my biggest fear at the time and what felt so incredibly scary. I think for people who've never had an eating disorder, it might be like, well, you're just like eating a hamburger, like spaghetti and meatballs, like what's the big deal? But it was like terror, to begin to challenge some of those foods in the beginning. And so seeing that I could do that, it helped me realize that I'm more powerful and capable than I realized, and that even if something feels really hard and difficult, it's doable. And I think that has helped me to push past any limiting beliefs that could have held me back in terms of like business or building the eating disorder center or relationships. So learning how to challenge the stories that, like you just talked about, like I don't deserve love, stories that my mind was telling me. I think, again, learning about my inherent worthiness and how to be more compassionate with myself was something that came out of this, which was really important because even though it wasn't onto food for most of my early life, I've always had a tendency towards perfectionism and being a really harsh self-critic to myself. And so recognizing that I didn't have to be perfect. And I think that belief, like recognizing I could be flawed and still worthy, and I didn't always have to be quote unquote perfect, helped me to do things that I wouldn't have been able to do before because my perfectionism kind of kept me hostage a little bit. And I think also just being able to rebuild my relationship with food and my body, I think has put me in a better place than somebody who's never had an eating disorder, because now I can go out. I don't have diet culture thoughts. I can eat what I want. I can respect my body. I can look in the mirror and be fine with it and not obsess about it. But I think had I never been forced to work through these issues, I might have always had some underlying self-judgment, self-criticism, negative thinking patterns.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really beautiful. I think that's an aim, that's a human aim, regardless of whether we go through an eating disorder or not. I think, as we've talked about on the show before, like there's so much culturally trying to inform us in ways that's just so insidious, right? And vile and not true to who we are and not true to like where we should be and where we should be going. And, going through an experience like you've gone through, and an eating disorder is truly a trauma, right? It's like it's a trauma we're experiencing. And to go through that and gain such beautiful insight out of those experiences, to get to a place where you are now, Jennifer, and sort of having that, beautiful relationship with food, and you've done like the inner work that I think, like I said, that we all need to do, regardless of whether or not we, have an eating disorder, or have gone through an eating disorder,
Yeah. No, absolutely.
So help me understand, like, so you start sort of in your recovery process. Did you go to treatment? What were the components of your recovery that helped you specifically?
Yeah. So my dietitian, who I had first seen, suggested, she was like, look, things are getting worse and not better. And she suggested I go to residential treatment. And I was very stubborn at the time. So that scared me. And I was like, I am not doing that. And it lit a fire under me to where I felt more able to push myself, because I had a goal, which was to stay out of residential treatment. Looking back, I think going to residential treatment, I mean, there are pros and cons, obviously. It might have saved me some struggle and and time. But so again, I'm not promoting that people avoid residential treatment. That was just the path that I took, was outpatient treatment. And what helped me, I think there were a few different things. Definitely having a team supporting me, having a dietitian, having a therapist. I also had a mentor through a program that is now no more, but it was called Mentor Connect. So I had a recovered mentor that made a huge difference for me, who I could reach out to when I was struggling. And I think there were a few other things. So finding the health at every size movement, which I kind of stumbled upon on my own, was a major game changer for me in terms of my body image and in terms of recovery. I had never heard of it before. I grew up in diet culture, obviously, like most people do.
Yeah.
And so recognizing that like weight gain didn't have to be bad, and that being in a larger body didn't have to be bad, and that we make so many assumptions about weight and health that are pretty flawed and problematic, like that, all of that really helped me a lot. And that was something that I took it upon myself to learn more about, because unfortunately my therapist was not health at every size, I would later learn. So I think there was only so far she could take me in terms of body image, because she was still so fat phobic, unfortunately. So that was a major thing. I think self-compassion was also a game changer, because I didn't even realize that there was a different way you could relate to yourself. I was so used to beating myself up and saying, you're a failure if you don't get an A on this, to myself all the time. So learning how to relate to myself more compassionately was key. I think the exposure therapy really helped. I ended up asking a different dietitian, because I ended up switching to eat desserts with me every week, because I was too afraid to do them on my own. And so that helped me a lot. And I think also ultimately coming up with a bigger purpose for my life, because it was around that same time where I'd always had an interest in psychology, but initially I thought I was going to do musical theater. I was a musical theater and communication major. And then I decided that I didn't like that. It wasn't fun doing it at like the professional college level. And so I was thinking about my other interests, and I realized I was really interested in psychology. And initially I had no interest or desire to be an eating disorder therapist. I just wanted to be a therapist, which is apparently something I had mentioned when I was younger. So I think that predated the eating disorder.
Oh,
but
funny.
Yeah, obviously this got me even more interested in being a therapist. So that became a motivation for me too, because I was like, I want to help other people. I don't feel that I can do that if I'm not well myself. And so that was like something to reach for. And I want to say to anyone listening, it doesn't mean you have to be a therapist. It's just having that thing to reach for that feels bigger than yourself, that feels purposeful, that your eating disorder takes away from, whether that's relationships or a career goal or a passion you have for yourself. I think that having that why can help when times are really hard.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think finding, things bigger than ourselves is a life pursuit. I think that's always worth striving for, because, we lean on our ego, and I find that the more we can sort of reduce that ego and not even be stirred by it, as the better off we are.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a great quote. I don't know who said it, but it's when you feel helpless, help someone. And I think being able to serve other people, even in high school, obviously we're required to do community service hours. And I think doing that kind of volunteer stuff, I really took to, and I really enjoyed it. And yeah, I think like being able to be of service can get us outside of our own heads and can be really helpful in terms of recognizing that there's more of a world out there than what's inside of our head.
Yeah, absolutely. So for someone listening, Jennifer, who, may be struggling, or doesn't know, like maybe they're struggling with disordered eating, like what are some of the like surefire, clear signs that like, okay, you may want to talk to someone, you may have an issue, like what are some signs?
Sure. So I think there's a lot of signs, and I can just kind of throw them out in terms of different diagnoses. But I think constantly thinking about food is generally a sign that we're malnourished when you're thinking about food all the time, because evolutionarily, our bodies wanted us to get food if we were in famine and starving so that we would live, right? So the more malnourished you are, typically the more you think about food, at least in the beginning. So constant thoughts about food, researching recipes online, spending hours doing that, spending hours or even really any time analyzing nutrition labels, counting, different grams of different things. I think this was a behavior for me, using measuring cups when you're not baking. That's another thing. Excessive condiment use. This was another issue that I had, and I guess I won't get too into it to not trigger people, but abusing diet sodas, abusing things like mustard, abusing artificial sweeteners. I think those can all be some big red flags and behaviors. Eating in secret because of shame, consuming way more in a short period than quote unquote the average person would consume until you're physically uncomfortable, you feel guilty and shameful and distressed, any kind of purging behavior. And so that could look like self-induced vomiting, that could look like laxatives. And then one we don't talk about a lot, that could look like purging through exercise. So engaging in compulsive exercise, which was also a problem for me, having a very rigid exercise routine with lots of guilt and anxiety about it being broken, exercising while injured or ill. I remember having strep throat and exercising, like, even though it feels terrible, it's like that guilt is so high. So overriding your self-care for something like that, being obsessed with the number on the scale. So spending a lot of time weighing yourself, focusing on weight loss all of the time, anxiety about eating out at a restaurant, feelings of shame and guilt around eating, or a sense of like morality around food. So like, I'm a good person if I eat this way. I'm a bad person if I eat that way. And like, there's one correct way to eat.
Right.
Another one, I'm just going with different diagnoses in my head, could be sensory issues around food. So maybe it's less talked about, but you have a lot of anxiety around trying new foods. You have a very limited number of foods that you feel safe to eat. And then maybe some sensory issues around the food. So you feel a lot of anxiety around texture, or different flavors of food. So I'm talking about more of an ARFID presentation right now,
Gotcha.
Without body image issues. So I just threw a lot of warning signs at you, but there's a ton, and I wish some of these things were more publicized because I didn't recognize them in the beginning.
Right. Yeah, one for me was, essentially just like eating like a protein bar, like these things as like sort of alternatives to actual food and an actual meal, I wonder, like, as you were saying that, it got me thinking about, and now I'm losing it. Now it's going out of my brain. Shoot. Gosh darn it. You were saying all the
exercise, sensory issues,
Gosh
condiment.
Oh, I know. So one of the things I love about what you're doing, Jennifer, what people like, Christy Harrison are doing, others in the field, like, is sort of challenging the notion that, like, there's been this long sort of standing idea that, eating disorders are a white female problem. They are, they're a thin problem. They're a beauty problem, right? They're like this striving to be sort of more beautiful or whatever. And I think like that should be challenged, don't you think?
100%. I think this was a stereotype that I held before I got sick. I thought that eating disorders were diseases of young, affluent Caucasian teenagers who just, wanted to be thin, and it was a diet gone too far. And I think that that is far from the reality of eating disorders. From, what I see in my practice and what we know, eating disorders really don't discriminate. They can affect people of any age, any race, any gender, any ability, any socioeconomic status. But unfortunately, because of stereotypes and stigma, a lot of people who don't fit the mold don't reach out for help. And that can really skew the data and the numbers around, what someone with an eating disorder, quote unquote, looks like. But they can impact anyone, just like cancer doesn't discriminate. Eating disorders don't discriminate either. And then I 100% agree and want to challenge this myth that, people with eating disorders are somehow vain and it's a disease of vanity. I think that's also so far from the truth. First off, people with eating disorders are amazing and resilient and intelligent and funny and some of the best people that I've ever met. And it's not a disease of vanity. I think like anything else, it's a severe mental illness that the way it manifests is a focus on food and weight. And again, that might be part of the picture, but there's always something underneath it. Even if on the surface, the person is saying to you, I just want to be thin, I just want to be thin. Well, nobody wants to be thin living alone by themselves on a desert island. So it's because of what they think it will bring them. So, often underlying a lot of this is love, connection, belonging, a sense of acceptance. Many people with eating disorders are trauma survivors. Again, not all, but that can certainly play into eating disorders as well. So I think ultimately eating disorders are resilient coping strategies for dealing with difficult emotions, trauma, sense of low self-worth. And they can work, right, for a short time, but in the long term, they make people miserable, depressed, and shrink your whole life. But that's a much better way to conceptualize them than to think about what the media says, which is that, it's just like people who want to look like a model on a magazine. Like that's not what causes eating disorders.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're dangerous, right? Like I think the death rate is very high.
Yeah, it's every 62 minutes. They say somebody dies of an eating disorder.
Wow.
And, I'm very fortunate and grateful, knock on wood, to have never lost a client I've also never had like a close friend or somebody close to me pass away from an eating disorder. But I've been hearing actually a lot about people passing away recently just because I have a lot of Facebook friends in the eating disorder community. And so I've had people very recently, mutual friends, where I didn't know the person, but we had mutual friends in common, or they had even added me on Facebook because I accept everyone and I didn't know who they were. And, hearing about a few people who recently lost their lives. And it's just such a sobering reminder that, eating disorders are deadly. And I think they get you by saying, well, people die, but not you. You're not unwell enough. You're not underweight enough. Your labs are normal, whatever it is. But it's like, things can go downhill very quickly. And I think people always think that they're going to be the exception, but eating disorders can really, wreak havoc on the body and create a lot of cardiac complications. And I think, anorexia is the deadliest mental illness, with most of the deaths being caused by cardiac arrest and suicide. And we know that, purging and other behaviors also put strain on your heart and can cause people to go into sudden cardiac arrest. So they're really scary illnesses.
Yeah. Yeah. I almost died. The doctor said, my heart's going to stop unless I do something, because I was very, very sick. It's scary.
You don't have to share this, by the way, if you're uncomfortable, but can I ask what your reaction was to hearing that at the time?
Of course you can. Yeah. No, happy to share. It was, I think, if I'm being honest and looking back on that period of my life and being kind to that person who I think I hated for a long time, I think I wanted an out in a way. Like I think at the time I was going through a lot of suicidal ideation. I was constantly thinking about suicide and self-harming, and I think that in a way, I think I wanted an out. Like, I wanted an out in the sense of, like, I know no longer, I wanted to cease existing. I didn't want to die, but I just wanted to cease because the pain was so much. I was in so much physical pain and emotional pain, right? And it's like, I don't know how I did it because Jennifer, I don't know if you know this part of my story, but at the time I was studying abroad in Swansea, Wales, and I was all alone. And I was taking, these classes on William Blake and Chaucer and all these, I'm a lit major, and I don't know how I got through it. Talking about like the sort of the mental depletion of having an eating disorder, I really don't know how I got through it, but I also don't know how I gathered the strength, I guess, or foresight to make an appointment with a doctor even, because I feel like looking back at that now, I feel like it was a sort of a last call for help. Like I needed, in a way, I really needed and wanted someone in the medical field telling me I needed to change unless I would die. Cause like I got, I never got any treatment, inpatient or outpatient. I kind of just did it on my own. And I think if I hadn't gone to see that doctor who probably didn't understand eating disorders, this was 2001, around there, and a long time ago, right? But he knew that I was, and again, and I'm just going to say trigger warning, and I'll put a trigger warning at the top of this episode. I was 114 pounds, and very, very sick. And he knew that, if I didn't do something that I would die. And it felt like it. Like it felt like every day during that period, it felt like I had such a physical, heavy burden on my heart. And I think because it was sort of giving its last few beats, right? So it felt, to answer your question, to make making this very long, but when he said that, I felt relief. I felt like, okay, I can do this. I don't want to die. I don't truly want to die. And it took a long time to find sort of a healthy perspective on food and peace in my body and all that time. But at least I had the go ahead to start eating, because I wasn't.
Yeah. And I appreciate, the strength and the vulnerability it takes to share that and to reach out for help when you're in that kind of state and your eating disorder has really taken a hold of you. And, I think that took a lot of strength and courage. And I just want to reiterate too, what I think both you and I know, that just because I know the way eating disorders work and people have a sense, and I know I did this when I was sick, where I was like, yeah, people pass away, but that's never going to be me. Like my weight's not that low. And this whole, like, I'm not sick enough, right? Like other people deserve recovery, or other people are really sick, but I'm not. And so I just want to reiterate that while eating disorders can have serious physical and medical complications, they are mental illnesses, right? So anyone struggling with an unhealthy relationship to food in their body deserves treatment and support, whether, you're physically impacted or not. These are serious illnesses. And, if you're questioning whether you're sick enough, that probably means that you are and you need treatment.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking the question and for, recognizing that. Yeah, recognizing all of that. I really appreciate your insight. One of the things that you mention on your website, Jennifer, is this idea of individualized treatment. I'm wondering, like, how do you do that? Because it's, as you know, it's such a, like in the classroom, right? Like we all learn differently. We all sort of associate or sort of jive with different therapies differently, right? And like, how do you, as someone now who, has recovered and has started this amazing eating disorder center and is doing this amazing work. How do you meet people where they are and give them the treatment, the individual specific, like for their specific, case? How do you give them that individualized treatment?
Absolutely. And so I think in terms of it being individualized, like you said, that's really important. So really where it starts is with the therapeutic relationship, the relationship that the client has with the therapist, which has been shown to be the number one predictor of successful therapy outcomes. So, it's first individualized when it comes to building that relationship and building rapport, right? Like some clients might have more of a sense of humor and I can joke around with them a little bit, obviously, like when appropriate, or we have something we can connect on. We have a common interest, right? Just as I'm building that relationship and getting to know them. And then from there, so my therapy style, again, I have a style, but I can also tweak it depending on the person sitting in front of me. That includes, like you said, meeting the person where they are. So I'm not going to give somebody a goal that feels, I always say, like, I want it to feel uncomfortable, but not unsafe. I'm not going to give someone a goal that's light years ahead of where they feel that they can push themselves, right? I want to meet that person where they are and still be setting goals and challenging their eating disorder, but not saying, because actually thinking back, I remember I had, again, a dietitian that I saw who was like, well, I need you to be eating this much of this. And it was way more than I was currently doing. And I just thought about that goal and I felt totally overwhelmed. I didn't do it at all. Right. So I needed a more gradual approach. And some clients are ready to jump in. They're like, yeah, I can do that. But I needed to be met where I was a little bit more. Obviously, again, taking into consideration, where the person's at. And there are times where they really need to up their nutrition significantly, right, for physical reasons more quickly. So we take that into consideration. Then, of course, we take into consideration cultural factors, things of that nature when it comes to treatment, individualized preferences. And then we also tailor treatment in terms of the treatment approach that we use based on the person, based on where they're at, and based on the diagnosis as well. And part of that, too, is blending different therapy models. So I don't use just one model because I think different things work for different situations and different people. I use a combination of acceptance and commitment therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, a little bit of CBT. And then for teens, sometimes I use more FBT informed treatment. And a lot of these treatments have similarities and differences. But again, certain things are going to jive better with different clients, and certain clients are going to find certain concepts helpful that other people might not find helpful. So it's really getting that intuitive sense of where the person is at, getting feedback, asking them, does that feel doable? How do you feel about doing this assignment? And if they're like, no, I never journal, then it's like, okay, I'm not going to force you to journal if you don't like journaling. Like, let's do something else.
Sure.
So being a little creative with it. And I don't know, I like to think myself and the team of people I work with, we're also a little bit untraditional in the sense of, I've had clients bring me their scales to put into the dumpster, and I've picked up old sick clothes with clients, and, I've, what else have I done? Well, obviously I eat with clients a lot, which is something that I never had a therapist do with me, and I think would have been super helpful. So I think there are a lot of, in a long answer, there are a lot of different ways that we can individualize treatment, but people are all unique. And while eating disorders have similarities, everyone's struggle is a little bit different. So we have to tailor the treatment towards the person who's in the room and where they are.
Yeah. I mean, and it sounds like there's a great room and capacity for empathy in there, right?
Absolutely. I think having an eating disorder is not a requirement to be a good eating disorder therapist. I think there are a lot of ways that we can build empathy, right? And certainly I haven't struggled with every presenting issue, although, I do feel weirdly fortunate that I have dealt with, some additional mental illnesses in addition to an eating disorder, such as depression, anxiety, PTSD. So that helps me. But yeah, I think especially having gone through my own struggle it helps me to kind of think back and remember how I felt and to be able to really deeply empathize with my clients and how much they're struggling.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a question from a listener, Jacqueline, who says, what is the most difficult part about being a therapist for clients with eating disorders when you were on your own journey of healing and recovery?
Yeah. So I wouldn't say, of course, like we're all people and we all deal with issues in our life and evolve, but I wouldn't say I'm still on my own journey of recovery.
Right.
A question that I get a lot, and I don't know if this is what she's alluding to, is people on Instagram will DM me and say, like, does it ever trigger you seeing clients given that you've had your own history? And honestly, it doesn't trigger me at all because there's no part of me that wants to go back to the eating disorder at this point. And I wouldn't do this work if I felt differently or if I felt in any way triggered by clients. I think the hardest parts about being a therapist don't really have anything to do with my own personal history. I think that's only been an asset. And, in terms of like the hardest parts, I won't go on a whole tirade here, but, dealing with other providers and doctors who are fat phobic is a hard part.
Sure.
Dealing with, I'm trying to think about what else is difficult. Sitting with someone in severe depression and knowing that sometimes like you have to be able to hold space for that person, even if you want to jump in and try to fix it, that can sometimes be difficult, seeing somebody suffering. But in terms of my own history, I think it's only been an asset. I don't find it difficult at all because of my own history, if that makes sense. Totally
makes sense. I'm wondering, so you mentioned someone like maybe having depression and obviously we all, there's often co-occurring things going on. In the case of like a client who comes to you, Jennifer, and is struggling with anorexia, for example, and is also struggling with depression, is that something that the eating disorder center, like, are you addressing both things, or is the person also like seeking help for depression from, a specialist elsewhere? How does that work?
Yeah, so we address depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress a lot, as well as we have a specialist who does OCD alongside eating disorders. I also have clients in addiction recovery. I have a lot of experience with all those issues. So barring, again, OCD is not my specialty. So I consult with my colleague and refer out if needed for that specifically. I know like what I'm good at and what I'm not as knowledgeable or specialized in. But yeah, when I say it's difficult, I more so mean seeing somebody in pain, right? Who's in that deep despair of depression, remembering how that felt for myself. Because, I too have a history of dealing with, I mentioned like suicidal thoughts, brief period of self-injury. So I remember how hopeless, and I think one author, I'm trying to remember who, described it as like being in a burning room. I remember this is how I felt when I was suicidal. It was like you're in a burning room and the flames are getting close to you. And so you desperately want to jump out the window and everyone's saying, don't jump, but you feel like you're being engulfed by the flames. For me, that was how it felt.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. And so, I wish I could, and I do say to them that, I've had this experience and I know it feels completely hopeless, but it can get better. But again, I remember how despairing that felt, right? So there's part of me that wishes I could just take the pain away. But I think, everyone has their own healing journey, and being able to come out the other side can build strength and character. But long-winded way of saying, yes, I feel very comfortable working with both depression and eating disorders, and I have many clients who have struggled with both.
Yeah. It just occurred to me, like we were talking before, Jennifer, about like when we were sort of maybe in the throes of our eating disorder and reflecting on the time, which was, like when I was growing up, 80s, 90s, you have, 90s peak diet culture, right? And, thinness, all that stuff. I'm wondering for you, for maybe some of your clients who are like teenagers, who are much younger than us, are they struggling with the same types of cultural, like thinness is good or whatever nonsense? or are there other things cultural like that? It just occurred to me that, like, obviously I think we're making progress as a society, but there's certainly a lot of bullshit that still exists.
Yeah, for sure. I think they're struggling with a lot of the same things, like the thin ideal standard being super glorified in high school. I do think that when I was young, and I'm sure when you were young, I know when you were young, Instagram and Snapchat, and even for me, I didn't have a cell phone, I think, until my senior year of high school. And I don't even think I had texting then. So those things have all brought in another layer, which I've worked on with clients where they're seeing Instagram pictures of other people in bikinis. And, I sound old saying back in my day, but back in my day, it was like the magazines that we were looking at, right? It was like Cosmo Girl and 17 and all this stuff. Now people don't really read magazines that much, and it's more people they're seeing on Instagram. So it feels even more real, even though we know that they're using Facetune and filters and, there's a lot of unhealthy stuff that goes into it. But I think social media has definitely made it easier for people to engage in body comparisons. And then I think this whole like wellness orthorexia culture wasn't super popular when I was young. And I think that's really expanded. And so you'll see more people with eating disorders whose eating disorder was, again, not caused solely by, but triggered in part by things like going on the Whole30 diet. And people with, at times, more of that like orthorexic presentation, or at least having orthorexic traits based on this huge emerging like wellness culture trend.
Yeah. Ugh. Yeah, I forgot about the social media piece of it. Yeah, I didn't have a cell phone until I think I was like 22. But yeah, social media can be such a connecting, beautiful force. But yeah, it can be very depleting as well. And then you have the seemingly persistent sort of capitalist-driven sort of diet drinks and diet pills, and that stuff seems to just hang around.
Yeah, and all the skinny teas and aka laxative teas and just other trends and like celebrities who are very shallow and superficial promoting things on social media. Yeah, I think there's a lot of that going on, which is obviously super unhelpful to all of these impressionable young minds.
Yeah. How do, like, so, say I'm a young person and I don't want to be persuaded by some of this cultural stuff that, maybe I'm a fan of Kim Kardashian or whatever, or
She was what I was thinking of. Sorry, I have to interject that, but the Kardashians, when I was saying like superficial, shallow celebrities.
Oh, I know. Oh, I know. Our aforementioned hero, Jamila Jamil, is not fond of them and their diet promoting ways. But like, how do I sort of maintain the strength to like not buy into that? Because it can be so compelling and it's so pervasive and it's everywhere and it's in our faces all the time. Like, how do we not buy into that?
Yeah. I mean, a few ways. I think, let's say the person's like, oh, I really love the Kardashians and I love watching the show, and they're deeply struggling with body image and, how they feel about themselves and, their appearance. Well, what I might have them do is, okay, like, I'm not telling you not to watch it, but can you rate your mood, your body image, dissatisfaction, and all of that before and after watching each show? And let's just gather some data. And I would be very surprised, because I remember watching the Kardashians when I was young, and I think it definitely makes you fixate more on your appearance. Even if these celebrities, the Kardashians, for instance, are quote unquote promoting like a curvier look per se at times, although they're still dieting and promoting this flat tummy bullshit. I think that show in specific and other shows like it, their whole lives are based around using their bodies and their appearance as ways to make money, right? A lot of them have makeup lines and, do a lot of photo shoots and swimsuits and whatnot. And so I think that show in general has such a focus on appearance and on, what they're wearing and fancy hairstyles and whatnot. So I would have the person get curious and look at how it's impacting them. And if it is negatively impacting their mood, how they feel about themselves, let's work on eliminating the things that they can, right? We're all in diet culture, so we can't just like turn it off, but looking at, okay, is there another show like The Good Place that I could watch that is less appearance focused and has more of a storyline? And so, I mean, I know it's possible because I've done this for myself. You know, part of being in the health at every size, eating disorder treatment community, and just so I don't get angry all day long, is I have a lot of Facebook friends and people I follow on Instagram and media that I consume that has no element of diet culture in it. And so, you know, I don't have a problem seeing diet culture things. I get a little irritated because I know how triggering it can be for some of my clients, but it's not that I need to do that necessarily to like protect my mental health. It's just a preference. But I have made it where I see very few, like I'm surprised when I hear people engaging in diet culture discussions these days because I just don't surround myself with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I know it's possible to create your own bubble of things that uplift you and inspire you. And so that's what I would encourage people to do to kind of start to combat the negative messages, because I think like you could tell yourself, oh, I'm going to watch this show and I'm not going to let it get to me. But there's so much research, you know, even in the marketing world on like subconscious marketing. And, you know, for instance, sorry, I'm a big nerd on this kind of stuff. I think it's interesting, like product placement.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Morgan Spurlock did a film on product placement and advertising. And, you know, if you're like many people, including myself, I'm not paying attention if I'm watching a show and the person's holding a Coke. I'm not thinking about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they have these things that are like sponsored, placed in the show to make money. And so I kind of see diet culture that way, where it's like you might tell yourself, oh, I know that stuff's not important. But throughout the show, they're talking about their exercise routine. They're, you know, showing off their bodies. Like you're getting that subconscious message.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I thank you for that. I appreciate that. Well, you know, as we start to kind of wrap up, I'm wondering, you know, what's on the horizon for the Eating Disorder Center? What are your business goals? What do you hope to achieve that you haven't achieved yet?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this a lot just because I revisit my goals every couple months, and with the new year, what I'm hoping for in 2020 is to expand our services, to hire a few more therapists and expand in that way. I think eventually I might toy around with the idea of developing some kind of IOP because resources are pretty lacking in Maryland where I am, or even a virtual IOP. But that would probably be later down the track. I'm also writing a book with my colleague, which is going to be out. I should know the exact date, but I don't know the exact date. A year from now. So yeah, I'm working on a book with a colleague that's going to come out on eating disorder recovery. And my long-term dream is to open a residential health at every size treatment facility where they're having groups on social justice issues and, you know, it's welcome to people of all shapes and sizes. And they're talking about some of the underlying issues behind eating disorders, such as trauma and self-worth and perfectionism. Yeah, so I guess those are some of my goals. While also it's very important to me to have work-life balance, which I think I'm at the best place I've ever been at with that. So I kind of have to find that dialectic between all of the goals I want to achieve and just making sure I have enough time for the things that are important to me, which I feel I've done a good job at.
Like The Good Place.
Mm-hmm.
Well, those are big. Those are big goals, and congrats on working on the book. And I think like a center like that is amazing and needed. So, you know, kudos to you for pursuing that. That's wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited because I never thought that I would open a group practice, and I never thought I would have a group this size. So I think I'm really excited to just see what the future holds.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Before we wrap up, we always talk about empathy heroes, Jennifer. So these are either people we know in person, family, friends, etc. Could be a character from a book or a movie or a television show, an author we love, etc. Just someone who is a great empathetic, feely human. I will name my empathy hero this week to give you time to think on yours. So yesterday, my wife and I have been going to this community garden and learning about composting and soil, and there's these older couple, these two folks, John and Deborah, who are Buddhists, and they've been sort of managing this community garden for a while, and they're just so knowledgeable. And after the community garden, we went over to their house and we had some coffee and these lemon squares that were delicious. And John was telling me about like his meditation practice, and he says he's real fond of this one Buddhist called Thich Nhat Hanh. I'm sure I'm butchering that name. And he gave me a few books, and I'm excited to read them. But I was doing some sort of research on him this morning, and I came across this quote that I really love, and I feel might maybe empower me someday to come try to, sort of mend the relationship with my father. But here's the quote, and I just really love it. It says, my dog's getting off the couch. Okay. Tap dancing on the floor. Okay. The quote is, "When another person makes you suffer, it is because he suffers deeply within himself, and his suffering is spilling over. He does not need punishment. He needs help. That's the message he is sending."
I love that.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, and it's just so compassionate and empathetic. And, me having not a relationship with my father anymore, like I've been thinking about the last year, maybe trying to mend that, now that I'm in a place in my life mentally and emotionally where, I can create boundaries, and I'm in therapy regularly, and I feel good about myself. I feel, maybe it's time. I don't know. But that I really just love that quote, and I'm excited to delve into some of his books.
Yeah, I know that's got to be really difficult, and I appreciate your strength and vulnerability in sharing that, and in considering, trying to connect again. And I love that book.
Thank you. So how about you?
Yeah. So I'm going to cheat a little bit and name two, but I'll keep it short.
Sure.
So one would be, I don't know if you follow Body Posy Panda or Megan Crab on Instagram.
I don't, but I must now.
Go follow her. She is a dream. You should try to get her for the podcast. I interviewed her for my blog, and she's just human sunshine is what I call her. But she is a big influencer in the body positive, fat positive, eating disorder recovery space, who has done crazy, amazing things through that, including written a book and a variety of other things. But she is just such an empathetic person from what I've seen. I mean, she has over 1 million Instagram followers, and she's been using her influence to do things like raise money for, the fires in Australia, and raise money for other really important causes. She personally offered anybody who donated to that. And then she did this before for Beat, an eating disorder charity in the UK. So she said anybody who donated over, it was a pretty small amount, she would send them a personal video. And so she spent hours doing thousands of videos for people to raise money.
Wow.
And so that's an example of someone who's just using their influence to make the world a better place, which is, again, what I aspire to do. And she's just such a great example of body acceptance and eating disorder recovery. And then
what's her handle again?
Sure. It's Body, BODY, Posy, POSI, Panda, PANDA.
Perfect.
You're going to love her Instagram. It's awesome.
I can't wait.
And then number 2, this is actually the first one that came to mind, but I was like, I can't name like 9 people. But I'm saying this really genuinely because I really mean it, is the clinicians who work with me at the Eating Disorder Center are some of the most, I don't know how I got so lucky. And for some reason, this is making me emotional, but they're some of the most compassionate, empathetic, amazing people that I have ever known or worked with. And I feel just like beyond grateful for that, how compassionate they are to their clients and then to everybody else on the team. I just wanted to throw that out there, that I have like the most amazing team working with me, and I'm really fortunate.
That's amazing. And I'd argue that's probably because of who you are. I mean, that's the thing about being sort of open and vulnerable, and we attract others, right, in that way, and we're mirrors for each other. And you know, when you're sort of out there doing the kind of work you're doing, you're going to be, you know, naturally drawn to people who are amazing, right? Because you're amazing. So like, I would give yourself, maybe some credit there. I don't know.
That means a lot. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. Well, Jennifer, where can people connect with you online and, learn more about the Eating Disorder Center, all of that stuff?
Sure. So they can go to www.theeatingdisordercenter.com, or they can also follow me on Instagram, where I share a lot about my life and professional work, pro-recovery inspiration at Jennifer_Rollin, R as in rock, OLLIN.
Lovely. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for being a guest on You Me Empathy.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
You're very welcome. And to you listeners, as I always say, I'm here, you're here, we're here together on this wayward, overwhelming, awe-inspiring, pale blue dot. We have each other. It's You Me Empathy.